One of the challenges that I had as well as a non-technical person creating a very heavy data science company is I had the same thing. I had technical co-founders and had a bunch of really talented engineers. At the same time, I felt a lot of those same moments, right? Where I'm like, oh man, like we're missing. I don't know why it doesn't work. I'm not clear. I look at code, I get very confused.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Founder Fridays, where we sit down with builders who've been in the trenches to talk shop, from product design and all the real lessons that no one puts in on a slide deck. I'm Ayomi, and I lead internal communications at Notion, previously founder of Canopy. And I'm here with Eric, a product manager at Notion, previously founder of Bayes Impact. And today we're diving into all the lessons learned from building from 0 to 1. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Welcome to the show. Excited to chat today.
Yeah.
Before we get into the lessons learned, would love for you to share a bit more about what Bayes Impact actually is.
Yeah, Bayes Impact is a data science nonprofit. And so we work with government agencies and large nonprofits and build data science tools to help them make better decisions and help their day-to-day work. And we went through YC back in 2024, and me and my co-founder built it from the ground up.
Talk to me a little bit about what the YC experience was like.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. YC was about like 50 companies at that point, and we were the only nonprofit in the batch. So it was an interesting experience on that front. But it was very hands-on. So we went right into figuring out what our customers would look like. We were still very early. It was like a napkin sketch of an idea. The YC really helped us just refine what we were going after in terms of customers and market.
Going through obviously YC, you obviously had a lot, being part of an accelerator, you obviously have a lot of support around you. Was that something that you would recommend to founders and early stage or first time founders?
It's interesting. YC has evolved a lot over time. So I don't know if I can speak to maybe kind of the velocity that YC had at the time. I think one of the things that might still ring true is it really depends on your stage of company. So for us, I would say we're a little bit too early. And so what made it tough is when YC is an accelerator, it's about getting you to the next milestone. And I think actually what would have been beneficial for us was taking a little bit more of a step back and being like, hey, what are even some of the spending a little bit more time in hypothesis mode, which is a little bit counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of the philosophy that's out there. But us actually taking it slower might have been better. We didn't really hit our stride in terms of value of YC until maybe like the last month.
Okay, that's super interesting. And tell me where, obviously you're at Notion now as one of our product managers, but where is Bayes Impact today?
So Base Impact, my co-founder is operating it, and I'm continuing to support. And it is operating in Europe and also in the US. And it's interesting because it's gone through a lot of iterations. The core mission is still there about helping to improve decision making, but we moved from developing products to offering services to developing more products. And so the organization has evolved a lot, but it's still operating in the social sector space and working in both in Europe and the US.
Looking back now, what were some of the earlier learnings that you're like, oh, if only we had done X or Y, we would have found out so much quicker and it would have just put us on a different path?
I think this goes back to the sitting with the idea and sketching it out a little bit more. We started off with this broad statement that, hey, data science, and now, it's become AI and all those things, could have a lot of leverage in helping for good organizations be a lot more efficient. But we didn't know whether we wanted to be a product organization or almost like a tech enabled organization. So did we want to be more of a Palantir or do we want to be more of a product? And that was a perspective that we were just like, screw it, let's just go talk to customers and sell them, you know. And if you do that naively and you have a bunch of data scientists, you end up just making a services company. And so we were like, we're killing it. Like we have this amazing services business, right? And we have all these super talented engineers. Like we hired the first data scientist from Uber. We hired like somebody who made some of the early stuff at Google Maps, right? And we're like, we're YC, like raise all this funding. And we're just sitting with like, oh, we have like 30 people now, and I'm running a consulting firm, you know, and that it's more data analysis than a software development, and we came here to have scaled impact. And so when we're looking at this, we're like, okay, our eventualities are making another, like a big consulting organization and with its own dynamics, or um, is there a product opportunity? And I think what was interesting is that we had that feeling throughout, and we kind of just went heads down in execution. And so I think it's a bit of like the taking a pause for us. And the lesson for me is almost the courage to follow your intuition, both for what is like a fun business, but also what will work, right? Because ultimately we wanted to make something pretty meaningful and scalable. So I think that's probably the one of the biggest lessons, yeah, that I had in the early days, kind of like really being having the courage to actually be able to flip because that's what you have in the early days, like a lot of flexibility to change.
For sure. And I guess having that courage and like, following your intuition, sometimes it's not as easy as it seems because, you're really attached to an idea or you think you're on the right path. I guess what would be your kind of advice and you found out there in terms of how to go about doing that? Is that talking to finding mentors, talking to mentors? Is it having how to have those difficult conversations with your co-founder if you think one thing and your co-founder thinks something else? Like any sort of learnings or insights from going through that journey that you would recommend to other founders?
I think for us, because we were in YC mode and we were so heads down on execution, that was sort of the world that surrounded us. So one is um, setting almost like a cultural principle, especially at these early stages, to just pull up and have sort of like a very honest feedback. Like, because you sense it, this is never a surprise, right? Like, that the feeling is there. And when everybody's executing, you don't want to, move the ship or shake it up. But I think creating a culture of just being like brutally honest, I think is really important. And we actually just got checked by one of our engineers that worked there. We're like, do you guys want to make a consulting business or not? And it's like, and we're like, what? What? They're like, you guys like need to figure that out, And then we're like, oh my God, we do need to figure that out. So I think it's finding the right set of people, I think is really helpful. But outside of the ecosystem that you have was really helpful for me. Um, but I'm curious, on your side. So I know we talked a lot about my background, but I'm curious for your company, what were some of the big lessons? First, a little bit of background on your company would be great. But also curious what lessons you had.
For sure. So I was building Canopy, which was a sort of a semi-anonymous platform for content creators to share information around pay transparency, opportunities, and working with management. So I would describe it as sort of a blind for the creative economy. And for me, I think my biggest lesson learned was that I was a non-technical founder and a solo founder, which saying that out loud makes absolutely no sense. So that would be a lesson learned there. And it wasn't because I didn't want to have a co-founder. Like I went through this whole series of like co-founder dating where, leveraging networks, going to events, trying to like find that special someone. And it did feel like dating. And I even had, I was part of accelerator programs. I was put in touch with by, potential co-founders by a number of VCs and things like that. So I was trying to find this co-founder, but unfortunately it just never worked out. It was never the right fit. And I do strongly believe that if it's not the right fit, not just to go with it, but just for the sake of having a co-founder. So I think for me, is if I could do it all over again, I would have, of course, picked a technical co-founder. Um, and I just feel like you want to understand deeply your product, and that's just something that I was not able to do from a technical standpoint.
What do you think were the consequences for you on that choice? Obviously, there's the understanding aspect, but in terms of your actual product and being able to iterate.
It's really important to just to be shipping and to ship fast, get the product in the hands of the customers, be able to iterate really quickly. And I didn't feel as if we were able to do that in terms of our development timelines. I just had to trust the process. And I felt like we weren't shipping fast enough to quickly have these iterative like feedback cycles because I was speaking to customers, but then, days, weeks would pass before we could implement those changes and be able to experiment and test and kind of see could we drive adoption or not and usage. So it was quite a frustrating process knowing that, we had these features in the pipeline, we had this backlog, and we weren't able to like ship, get feedback, ship again, iterate.
One of the challenges that I had as well as a non-technical person creating a very heavy data science company is I had the same thing. I had technical co-founders and I had a bunch of really talented engineers. At the same time, I felt a lot of those same moments, right? Where I'm like, oh man, like we're missing. I don't know why it doesn't work. I'm not clear. I look at code, I get very confused. And so I'm wondering both, digging deeper into a little bit more about when you say technical co-founder, like specifically what are the attributes or characteristics that you think would help both on like who that person is, but how you would engage in that relationship?
That is a very interesting question. I think as well, if I could do it again and I said I'd have a technical co-founder, yes, that's true. But I actually think now with the tools that are out there, I think something the barrier to entry in terms of being a non-technical founder is much easier at this point. So I feel like I would be wanting to experiment myself and see what I can like vibe code and see what I can make myself before even having to bring on a technical co-founder. I would try and level up my own understanding, try and build something basic myself so that I deeply understand what I have built, and then and then engage with like a technical co-founder. But I also think in terms of the dynamic, in terms of what you're looking for, it's a partnership because they have strengths that you don't have, you have strengths that they don't have, and it's understanding how to balance those and also like upskilling each other. And I do believe that's possible even from a technical standpoint. Like I don't think anyone's beyond learning how to be technical. And I think because of sort of speed and wanting to move really fast, I sacrificed that piece. I was like, that's
Mm.
okay. Like you're the technical person, you go build, I'll do everything else on the business side. But I actually think that's the wrong mindset to have.
I agree. I think like for me, because we were building this consulting-esque business, I was like, I just got to go and do sales and close these contracts. And one of the big lessons was that I wasn't close enough to the product and the tech. And at that time, there was no AI. So I'm like, I'm learning Python, what I mean? I'm like in Jupyter Notebook. I'm like, I can run the scripts myself. And it actually was insurmountable. I think what's been interesting here at Notion is like I'm recreating a version of Notion that I want using Cursor, just to start testing what those features can look like. Certainly, I would never actually be able to scale that type of product, but I think it totally changes the way that I would approach 0 to 1, right? Like I would make a prototype, then just go try to sell somebody. And like I could get like 3 contracts before we even really need to deploy anything for real. And I do think that's really just going to change the way that the early stage process happens.
In one way, it's like founders today, I guess, have less, especially with non-technical founders, you have less excuses why you can't build and ship because there are so many tools out there. But also, does that actually add like another layer of noise because there is so much out there, and is that actually also overcomplicating things? So yeah, it's an interesting balance to find, but I think it's a great opportunity for first time, especially for first time non-technical founders out there to try and start building.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, I'm curious how you think about like the future setup of what startups can look like. Um, I'm working on some of the AI things at Notion, and despite all the advancement in tools, it still just comes down to like who's the user, what's their problem, how can we solve that for them? But now you maybe have like 10x fewer people or something like that. And so yeah, I'm curious like how much of the lessons that we learned are even relevant, in this new like setup, right? Yeah.
Also very true. Like I think we're going to start seeing lots of, billion-dollar startups coming out which have like 5 to 10 person teams. And I think that's going to be, I think there could be a future where that becomes the norm.
Yeah, it's gonna be a wild world.
But if you were starting things again from scratch, what are the two things that you would fundamentally do differently if you're building base impact again? Or just building another startup for fun?
There's one thing that I wish I did last time and probably will be the same every time is to just have a very clear picture of the problem and the user. At Notion, we have a very large breadth of users, but it's the same question and same problem. I feel like that won't change. And in fact, it's even more important because it's just like, do you have the insight, regardless of your ability to like execute? Of course, you need that. Um, but the basics are always going to be super important. And we just skipped that part because we wanted to execute on base impact. So I think Second thing, when I think about what I would do is I think it's in this particular moment where AI is changing so much that the framework, and even like in the last couple months, like we had to completely change the architecture of what we're building because the models have just changed. You actually just need to think about the problem from a very generalized perspective. Like 3 years ago, be like, it's just a mega mind that can do anything. You're like, no, like it doesn't, now you're like, oh, actually, it is a mega mind that can do anything. So my question is like, even for vertical software companies, how much of the data moat will they have? Can you just approach problems assuming you have access to like a very general mind that you can call via an API and start from there? And I think that is what is really fundamentally different. Like your vertical and use case, it's almost contradictory to the first point. It's like what you start off with, you need to get that problem space and you need to get the wedge, but you have to build for something that is inherently very general.
How do you think your experience as a founder and the learnings from a founder have helped you land that Notion and your role at Notion here today?
For me, I Notion's like the first real company I've worked at. So it's just been like a bunch of startups basically. So I came in with just like a ton of founder energy. It was like 100 something people. And I was just like, we need to change the whole strategy. Like we need to go do this. That was actually really fun for me. Like it was an advantage and also like the challenge that I had to to deal with. But I think very practically, I came in thinking from the highest level strategically because that's just how I thought. I'm like, well, it has to connect to the vision. Then I make the thing, then I go build it. And that's actually very valuable in a company. And that's something that I've stuck to is like my brain still thinks that way, which is like, hey, what is the market move? Like if I were to put something out as like Notion is this now, starting from there. And I think that's something that is probably hard to stick to if you're in the grind really deep and like, I need to get this one email marketing campaign out there. And so I think that is something that's just been like trained into me because you just need to do that on the founder side. That I think is just like an MO that's been really helpful for me. But yeah, I'm curious for you, what has it been like? What has been the most valuable things about?
My God, good question. Well, first, I feel like the founder energy thing really resonates. Like joining Notion immediately from my final round interviews with Ivan, who is like truly still in founder mode, and builder mode himself, to just meeting the types of people I get to work with here. I just felt that even whether you're a founder or not, I think that energy kind of seeps through the entirety of Notion. But I think in terms of how my founder has helped me specifically with my role, I would say that we move really, really quick here. Having that stamina and ability to move as fast as the company has been really important to kind of getting me up to speed here. You have to have that kind of founder mindset to be like, don't ever be too attached to anything because you want to go back to the problem, go back to the customer, and is it right for them? Because if it's not, then we shouldn't be building it and we shouldn't be shipping it.
Given all that, if you were to start and another company, what lessons would you have for yourself, but also for other people?
For me, it is building out a great team. I think something that Notion really prides itself on is talent density. It's about, we're a small bus, but we're a small but mighty bus because we have people who are really high in craft. And, you can do a lot with not that many people if the team is incredibly talented and motivated and there's like a shared vision. For me, my founder journey was, for the majority of it, solo as like a one-person team. And while my sort of part-time team were all incredible in what they did, ultimately, when you're building something to last, to scale, you have to have a really talented team to be able to build that out. And I was not able to get them myself. So I think Notion is successful because yes, of course, Notion has an incredible product, but we have an incredible product because we have an incredible team to build that product. And that's what I would take forward if I was to do it all over again.
Well, yeah, like in the end, companies are a bunch of people trying to do something cool, right?
Right. Trying to solve a
And like,
problem.
yeah. Um, so I feel like that's a pretty good note for us to end on. But this has been really fun. And yeah, thank you so much.